On this episode of the Catholic Echo podcast from the Diocese of Youngstown, brought to you by the annual Diocesan Appeal and Cumulus Radio Youngstown, we're talking about saints in the diocese with Bishop David Bonnar, Sister Mary Alyce Koval, and Father Michael Balash. Find more about this episode's topic, including articles from the Catholic Echo, at www.catholicecho.org/podcast. And now the host of the Catholic Echo podcast, Dennis Viviana.
Welcome to the Catholic Echo podcast, joined by Bishop David Bonnar. Thank you for being here as always.
Thank you so much, Dennis.
Now, this week our topic is on saints in the diocese. I was curious if there is a particular saint that has been influential to your own life or ministry.
Well, first, let me say as a bishop, as I travel from parish to parish, as I celebrate ordinations where there are the litany of saints and what have you, my whole life is it's filled with the memories and the inspiration of the saints. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to, who might be my go-to people, I would say that there are two that stand out in my mind. The first one is St. Francis of Assisi.
Of course.
Because I was taught by the Sisters of St. Francis of the Providence of God for 8 years. Mm-hmm. So I kind of grew up with St. Francis and came to know him, and I served in ministry with some Franciscan sisters as well. And of course, I studied in Rome and was able to travel to Assisi and visit the tomb of St. Francis and just be caught up in the spirit there of Francis. Mm-hmm. So I would say St. Francis is a very important person in my life. The other one is St. John Marie Vianney, who is known as the patron saint of parish priests. St. John Vianney was a very simple, ordinary, humble man who made just a magnificent difference. People would travel for weeks to come and visit with him, to go to confession to him. And what I love about St. John Vianney is he is a model for every parish priest because of his deep devotion to the Blessed Sacrament. And I just recently had a chapel installed in my private residence, and I call it my St. John Vianney Chapel.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, when it comes to some thoughts on the roles of saints in the life of the church, what would you say?
Well, I think this really is brought home to me from a story that I was told many years ago. It was from a classroom where the teacher asked the students, "Who are the saints?" And this little boy raised his hand and he said, "The saints are the people that the light of God shines through." The teacher was really struck by this, so she explored a little bit further and said, "Jimmy, tell me, where did you get that idea?" And he said, "Well, I belong to All Saints Parish, and all of our stained glass windows have images of the saints. And when the light shines, the images of the saint come alive. The light shines through them." So, I think when we think of saints, they are lights, tiny pinpoints of lights as we live in the darkness of our own lives. Mm-hmm. I think the other image for me that speaks is that of inspiration, and that word inspiration involves breath. And so they kind of, much like we would go and get some oxygen, just to kind of recharge and reinvigorate. We've seen this in sports on the sidelines. The saints give us life. They give us a breath as we continue our journey onward. And these are people who we're named after, our cities are named after, our parishes are named after. And so they are people who we look up to as role models.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think they influence our spiritual life? They are someone we can pray to.
Well, I think the first thing is that they all were human in their own way, which meant that they knew the good, the bad, the ugly. They knew the capacity for good, the capacity for evil. They battled the struggles in life, and they persevered. I think the other thing is that they were open. Each saint has their own charism, but I think ultimately they're saints today because they were open to God's grace working through them. And sometimes that grace took them to places where they never envisioned going. Sometimes it necessitated even giving their lives. When we talk about the martyrs, there's a beautiful line in our tradition, "The blood of the martyrs are the seeds of the church." So I think that there's just so much to take away from these ordinary men and women who somehow found a way to stand up and to live according to God's plan.
Mm-hmm. From St. Columba, St. Patrick, my own church, St. Pope John the 23rd, any other figures that are saints in our diocese that really stand out, their stories to you?
Well, we could probably spend the next 5 podcasts on that, and I certainly don't want to single out one over the other. My motto is that all may be one. But, it's obvious that The saints were important to the immigrants when they came to the United States. They brought with them their devotion not only for God but for the saints. The saints are people who accompany us and help us along the way. And whoever the patron is in any parish, there's something special about them. They are a point of reference, and they offer inspiration and grace and intercession as that faith community moves forward.
And how can a particular parish better promote the stories and virtues of the saints to inspire their congregation? I know, talking about personal experience, when you were at St. Pope John the 23rd, my parish, you talked about the importance of his life, the fact that there's a statue in the back of the church. Father Lavelle has also hit that point as well. So how can other churches hit home this point?
Well, I think it's important to keep them close to us and keep them close to our faith lives. The pastor, through the use of the homily, can integrate quotes and stories of the saints from time to time. I think there's also the beautiful use of the bulletin, quotes. I mean, I'd love to just go to my phone and Google quotes of the saints on various topics. It's really interesting to read some of the things that they said. Very, very simple at times, but ever so profound. One of the main things is to just celebrate their life, celebrate their feast day, and to do that with great fanfare. I mean, not just at the altar, but to use it as an opportunity to bring the faithful together socially. So I think there's a lot that can be done around the realm of saints.
As always, thank you so much, Bishop Bonnar. Coming up next, I will speak with Diocesan Pastoral Associate Sister Mary Alyce Koval from St. Luke and St. Charles parishes, both in Boardman. Much more when the Catholic Echo podcast returns.
Wondering what happened to timely Catholic news in the Diocese of Youngstown? It's at CatholicEcho.org. There you'll find recent stories about Catholic life in all 6 counties of the Diocese of Youngstown, plus recent videos, podcasts, and even national and global news. You'll find it all at CatholicEcho.org under the News tab. Sign up for the email newsletter while you're there to have Catholic news delivered to your inbox.
When storms hit, we are there to rebuild. As our neighbors age, we lighten their burdens. As our veterans adjust, we ease their transitions. In every part of the country, we are there. We are Catholic Charities. We serve millions each year regardless of their faith. We put food back on tables, unlock doors, and walk together on the road back. Help Catholic Charities serve your neighbors in need. Join us at wearethere.us.
Where can you hear about faith in action? What does hope look like in our parishes and schools?
How do we share God's love in our charities and outreach?
The Catholic Echo amplifies the voice of Catholics.
In the 6 counties of the Diocese of Youngstown.
Connect with us to be inspired and challenged.
To a deeper relationship with Jesus Christ and His Church.
Visit CatholicEcho.org to find the Catholic Echo magazine,
Weekly podcasts, inspirational videos,
and our Sunday Mass from St. Columba Cathedral.
Follow diocesan social media on Facebook and Instagram.
Or find what's happening now at doy.org.
The Catholic Echo is your source for spiritual growth in the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown.
Did you know that the Catholic Echo magazine is delivered 10 times per year to 52,000 Catholic households in Northeast Ohio? That is more than 150,000 people. And the Catholic Echo website, CatholicEcho.org, has been averaging 30,000 views per month since it launched in February 2023. Advertise your business, special event, or service with the Catholic Echo in print or online. Email CatholicEcho@youngstowndiocese.org. Advertising discounts are available for Catholic institutions, as well as for businesses that commit to 5 or 10 issues in a year. Email CatholicEcho@youngstowndiocese.org or visit the advertising tab at CatholicEcho.org for more information.
Many sisters, brothers, and religious order priests served for little pay, and now their communities lack retirement funds.
I spent 34 years as a teacher.
I just loved interacting with the students.
Gifts to the Retirement Fund for Religious help provide for medications, nursing care, and more. An annual collection is held in parishes across the nation.
I always remember you in my prayers.
Please give to those who have given a lifetime. Visit retiredreligious.org.
The Catholic Echo is the media arm of the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown, and it seeks to inform and entertain Catholics in our 6-county diocese by forging stronger connections to our parish communities and highlighting the many blessings of Catholic life in our region. If you have a story idea for the Catholic Echo magazine, podcast, or website, send an email to catholicecho@youngstowndiocese.org. We'd love to hear your ideas.
Welcome back to the Catholic Echo podcast. Joining me now is Sister Mary Alyce Koval, Diocesan Pastoral Associate at St. Luke and St. Charles Churches, both of Boardman. And we hope to tell you a little bit more about both of these saints who played an integral role in the church. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Dennis. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
St. Luke did not meet Jesus, but he wrote the third gospel and the Acts of the Apostles. I guess what can you tell us about St. Luke's life and contributions to the early church?
I don't have the details of when he was born, but I know he lived to be 84 years old. So I think in those 84 years, he had a wide expanse of getting to know the early church after Jesus' death. One thing that marks St. Luke's gospel, as opposed to the others, is that it's very tied to history. He uses specific names, for example, King Herod at the birth of Jesus, Caesar Augustus, we've heard that name in Scripture. And his story coincides with the actual history of the time that was taking place at that time. He also uses the image of the journey to Jerusalem, which a lot of us are familiar with, and that ties in Jesus' passion, his death, and his resurrection, all taking place in Jerusalem.
What aspects of his life actually resonate with you personally, and how can his life inspire us in our own spiritual journeys?
One thing about St. Luke that inspires me is the simplicity of his gospel. When you read St. Luke, it's almost like you're reading a story, and it's very easy to read. Some of the aspects of his gospel that speak to me personally are his emphasis on prayer. We see Jesus praying before his baptism. We see him praying before he chooses his disciples, before the transfiguration when he is with the 3 men up on the mountain. He prays in the Garden of Gethsemane. And the other important thing about prayer is that there are specific sections of Luke's gospel that we use in liturgy today, specifically the Magnificat, which we sing often, the Gloria that we sing at Mass, and then in the Divine Office, we use the prayer of Zechariah, the Nunc Dimittis, now you can let your servant go because I have seen the Savior, that idea. And I think the way he ties his story into the liturgy, which we are still living today, and it's a very important and crucial part of our church today.
And now St. Charles, he's the patron saint of both catechists and seminarians. He gave away much of his wealth to feed the hungry and care for the sick in Milan. Now, can you share an overview of St. Charles Borromeo's life and his role in the church during the Counter-Reformation?
St. Charles Borromeo's life was totally different than St. Luke's because he lived 1,500 years later. He lived in the 16th century. The story says that he was almost destined for church work because his uncle was the Pope. He was ordained at the age of 25, and 2 months later, after his ordination to the priesthood, he became a bishop. Then, shortly after that, he was named the Archbishop of Milan, even though he had hardly been bishop for very long. His uncle asked him to form a provincial council in Milan to promulgate the reforms of the Council of Trent, which had taken place a few years earlier. So coming off the Protestant Reformation, there were probably 50 years of turmoil from 1517 until 1565. Similar to today, we have, I'm sure there were people on the right, people on the left, and people in the middle, and so the church was floundering for where to find its identity. The Council of Trent had been suspended in 1552, but his uncle reconvened it in 1562. And Charles supported his uncle's decision to reconvene the council because he wanted to begin to put some order in the church. So one of the first things he did was write the Catechism, which was a compendium of what we should believe as Catholics, as opposed to what Martin Luther had proposed. He also was very instrumental in reforming liturgy books and prayers that we use in church. He did live a very simple life. He gave away a lot of his personal wealth to the poor. He was very pastoral when he was a bishop and went out to visit his parishes and worked with the priests. As far as establishing seminaries, one of the areas that he focused on was standards for his clergy. He also reformed the liturgy that they would be celebrating, and he also enforced accountability of the priests, both to God and to the church. He founded the CCD program because he believed that the education of children, as we do today, is the foundation for the growth of the church in the future. He was 46 years old when he died, so he didn't live very long, but in those 20 years of ministry, he accomplished very much. He did a lot.
And so much pressure probably on him having his uncle as the Pope,
yes,
right?
Yes, that's right. And probably a little bit of nepotism too, you know. I'm sure he got support from his uncle as he supported his uncle too. I think today we see St. Charles's formation from the 16th century to the 21st century now. We have CCD classes, or whatever they're called, in most parishes. We have adult education almost everywhere. We have liturgy, instruction, and formation, especially these last several years, the concentration on the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. And the other growing phenomenon in a lot of parishes is forming small groups for faith sharing and biblical studies. I think the Bible is becoming a lot more relevant to people's lives, and they're interested in what the Bible has to say. And there are many, many programs available for Bible study. That's the way we're living St. Charles's formation 500 years later.
Thank you so much, Sister Mary Alyce Koval. Coming up next on the Catholic Echo podcast, Katie Wagner goes one-on-one with Father Michael Balash, the Diocesan Vicar for Clergy and Religious. Much more to come. Keep it right here. Did you know that the Catholic Echo magazine is delivered 10 times per year to 52,000 Catholic households in Northeast Ohio? That is more than 150,000 people. And the Catholic Echo website, catholicecho.org, has been averaging 30,000 views per month since it launched in February 2023. Advertise your business, special event, or service with the Catholic Echo in print or online. Email catholicecho@youngstowndiocese.org. Advertising discounts are available for Catholic institutions, as well as for businesses that commit to 5 or 10 issues in a year. Email catholicecho@youngstowndiocese.org. Or visit the advertising tab at catholicecho.org for more information.
Many sisters, brothers, and religious order priests served for little pay, and now their communities lack retirement funds.
I spent 34 years as a teacher.
I just loved interacting with the students.
Gifts to the Retirement Fund for Religious help provide for medications, nursing care, and more. An annual collection is held in parishes across the nation.
I always remember you in my prayers.
Please give to those who have given a lifetime. Visit retiredreligious.org.
The Catholic Echo podcast will inform and entertain the faithful of the diocese by covering various topics that are relevant in the church today. Bishop David J. Bonnar begins the podcast with your host, Dennis Biviano, on the topic of the day, and then you'll hear from others with expertise on that topic. You can listen to the Catholic Echo podcast on WHOT-FM 101, WYFM-FM 102.9, WQXK-FM 105.1 on Sundays at 6:30 a.m., or catch it online by going to www.catholicecho.org/podcast. The Catholic Echo podcast is produced by the Communications Department of the Diocese of Youngstown.
The first Sisters of the Humility of Mary came together in France in 1854. In their rule, approved by the Bishop of Nancy in 1858, the founding sisters gave expression to their faith and their lived experience. The entire community came to the United States of America in 1864, including 9 professed sisters, 2 novices, 3 orphan girls, and Father John Joseph Bagel, the spiritual director for the little community, and their ecclesial liaison. In regard to the Eucharist, their rule, translated into English in 1877, clearly stated that they will love and serve Jesus Christ in his real and natural body, that is to say, the Holy Eucharist, in his temples. And they will serve him in his mystic body, their neighbors, who are his members. The personal experiences of the first Sisters of the Humility of Mary was one of wonder and reception of God's gratuitous gift of love in the person of Jesus Christ. This lived experience was also one of meeting Jesus in the sacrament of the Eucharist and of meeting and serving him in the sacrament of their neighbor.
This is Katie Wagner, the editor-in-chief of the Catholic Echo magazine, and I am here today to talk about the Retirement Fund for Religious. The collection for the Retirement Fund for Religious will be taken up the weekend of November 23rd and 24th. I have with me today Father Michael Balash in his capacity as the Vicar for Clergy and Religious, and he'll be talking with me about why this is important and why we should give to this important appeal. Before we started, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the statistics that relate to the Retirement Fund for Religious. So if you received your November issue of the Echo, you'll be able to reference the infographic that we have there, but the average cost of care for those past the age of 70 is $60,000 in 2024. And it is $90,700 for those who need skilled care beyond the age of 70. So it's a $1 billion industry, actually, to care for the senior religious in the United States. So, those are some of the basics of why this is important. But of the 476 communities in the United States that are here, only 27 of them are adequately funded on their own. So that is some of the basics of why this is important. Last year, we had 5 communities that received special funds, and we collected $283,478.90. So, Father, can you speak to that a little bit? Is there a goal for this year that we're hoping to collect? And, what are some of the ways that people can give to this fund?
There really is no goal. I think we have an obligation to take care of all of the religious people that have served the church and served the diocese and served many of our parishes over the years. I'm sure all of us have had some contact or some experience with either a sister or a religious priest that has been part of our life and part of our faith development. Years ago, when many of the nuns and religious priests worked in our schools, they were compensated just a minimal amount, and many of them didn't participate in Social Security. And as now the religious orders have been decreasing in numbers, and many of them are getting older and in need of care in their retirement, the religious orders are finding that they just don't have the funds, nor do they have the income from those who are working that can cover all the expenses. So this religious retirement collection was instituted a number of years ago to answer that need on the part of the religious orders that their members could be taken care of in their golden and senior years. People can donate in a number of ways. Obviously, the most common way would be for this collection on the weekend of November 23rd and 24th. But they can also donate directly to the diocese and have it marked Religious Retirement Fund. And all of those funds, 100% of those funds, then are
earmarked for the retirement, religious, and taking care of those good men and women who are part of religious orders.
Absolutely. And when this fund was explained to me when I started working for the diocese, I think another aspect of it that hadn't occurred to me was the fact that, back in the day, often there were many younger members of these religious communities that would help care for the older members. And now that often a lot of these communities are on the decline, that's no longer something they can rely on either. So that was just something I wanted to add because I found that to be interesting. That made sense. So can you explain the difference between, there is the national campaign for the religious, but yet it benefits the communities that are here. So how does that work? The funds go to the national and then they distribute it out to the communities that are here? Is that how it goes?
The religious communities that are in need of funds have to obviously fill out the paperwork and establish the need. And then it's like applying for a grant. But once the need is established, it's highly unlikely that their application is refused. And so the funds that we collect go to the national office, but some of them also stay here. And so the religious communities that are directly involved in the Diocese of Youngstown can apply either to us directly or to the national office for assistance.
And can you speak a little bit to the religious communities in general? I know we have a lot of them here in Youngstown, which is very special, I think, for our area. So can you speak to, in the year of 2024, what are these religious communities doing to contribute to our lives here across the diocese?
Well, as they continue to decline in numbers, obviously their presence is not as prevalent today as it was 30 years ago in our parishes, but they're still an active, vital part of the mission and ministry of the Church. And so many of them are involved in more specialized ministries. The Ursuline Sisters, for example, with Beatitude House. Humility of Mary Sisters are very much involved in the environment and the preservation and conservation of the environment. As they have had to change their focus and their presence, their commitment to the mission and ministry of the Church remains ever strong. And so they are an active part of the Church. And again, maybe not today as much as in years past, but I'm sure many Catholics have had some interaction or some presence of the religious orders in their lives and in their faith development.
Well, thank you so much, Father, for joining us and for explaining, why this is such an important fund and an important collection. Please remember to give the weekend of November 23rd and 24th. If you'd like more information on the Retirement Fund for the Religious, you can find it at www.doy.org. And if you would like to read more about the campaign and coverage of the campaign, visit thecatholicecho.org. So that's www.catholicecho.org.
The Catholic Echo podcast is a production of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Youngstown. Your host has been Dennis Biviano. Have a blessed day, and may God be with you.